Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us from today. My name is Ryan McCombs, and I help lead our university hiring and our security group at Salesforce. Salesforce, wow. First of all, thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are so excited to share more about security at Salesforce and how to help yourself get hired. But first, let's talk about myself a little bit more. I'm a Cal Poly alum who was originally born and raised in the Bay. I now call Denver home with my wife and a 1.5-year-old son. I'm a talent advisor here on the team, and I've been at Salesforce for 7.5 years. And that whole time has been on the university recruiting team. I have seen us grow the security internship program from 5 interns up to 120 for next summer. So we definitely have a ton of opportunity available, and we're glad you're here to join us today to learn a little bit more. Before we get into our different major teams and possible roles, I'd like to introduce you to Grusha Mehrotra, a former security intern and now security new grad. Grusha, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. First off, thank you for having me here and be a part of this very useful conversation for students looking out to make a career in security, Ryan. I think this is very useful and it's going to greatly benefit the students out there in terms of getting a good direction. To begin with, I'm a recent graduate from University of Maryland College Park who graduated with a master's degree in cybersecurity. To give you a little background, I actually got introduced to the field of security when I was in my final year of school, and I've been passionate about it since then. I say passionate because a lot of the knowledge that I gained in the field of security was through exploring the internet on the subject matter that I wanted to learn about, and then dedicating time to self-study on that topic. I think what really kept me going was my never-ending curiosity and my never-ending hunger to know more about the field of security. And this is exactly how I actually knew I had to make a career in it, since it clearly was my passion and calling. I now work as a full-time security engineer at Salesforce, and I'm a part of the same team that I interned with last summer, which is Sensors and Control Points, also known as SCOPE team. Or to put it in a simpler way, I work with the system security engineering team at Salesforce.
That's awesome, Grusha. Thanks. I think we'll touch on this again a bit later, but Grusha just brought it up. I think one of the major reasons she and so many other interns we've hired, the reason for being so successful is their natural curiosity to continue to learn. But before we get into too depth about what makes a successful candidate, let's first take a look at the major areas in the security organization and typical roles that we find in those areas. So at Salesforce, trust is our number one value. So we have a ton of sensitive data that our customers trust Salesforce to protect. So let's take a little closer look into the teams that help our customers' data and operations stay secure. So as we go through this overview, we'll touch upon the most common types of positions that we find in these groups. So our first major organization, and this organization is probably about half of the whole security group, is the security engineering and operations. And so this team is responsible for the run function of security. This team has amongst it positions under identity and access management, offensive security, so our red team, which is actually more of a purple team, incident response teams, IT operations for infrastructure security, network security, security monitoring, and threat intelligence, amongst many others. In this area, we have primarily security engineers or software engineers. And so if you're maybe a CS student who is new to security or trying to figure out if it's a field that you're interested in, our software engineering internships in security, they do not require you to be like a security student. So we're just looking for folks that are maybe interested in that area. So that's, if you're kind of figuring out what you want to get into, that could be a good possibility. Next, we have our security product management organization. So they help lead our long-term security plan, including the execution and adoption of the security controls by our internal external customers. And our primary roles here are PMs and technical program managers. Next, we have security assurance, and they help ensure that no significant security risks escape into our customer facing products and services, the supporting infrastructure, or enterprise technology stack by proactively scaling security practices at all stages of a project's life cycle. And so roles in this area, typically include the more niche security engineer type of roles. So like product security engineer, enterprise security engineer, offensive security engineer. We also have some program management in there that helps run the organization, customer success and advocacy, as well as security assurance automation. Excuse me. Security governance, risk, and compliance is next, or GRC for short. It's essentially our single authoritative source for current and desired state of security at Salesforce, and we're responsible for the overall management and reporting of the current security risk and compliance posture for all of Salesforce at any given point in time. So roles on this team are primarily just GRC analysts. We also have our Gov Cloud and operations. So Salesforce Government Cloud allows public sector customers at the state and local, national defense, and intelligence community levels to essentially digitally transform their missions and put the citizen at the center of every transaction. And so this is a very diverse team with a lot of different roles and responsibilities, but the major ones include like systems engineer, DevOps engineer, software engineer, and program managers. We got two more, so bear with me. Next is the security integration team. The security integration team provides cross-functional security leadership and partnership with each of the major Salesforce clouds to champion the adoption of shared security services, articulate our security requirements while presenting a unified view of security. This group is serving as the voice of our customer. So security integration drives alignment between security and the respective different clouds and products that Salesforce offers by understanding how our security requirements and programs are perceived by customers, while also identifying opportunities for continuous improvement through thoughtful collaboration and strategic planning. This team is primarily product and program managers as well. Our last group, probably the smallest of them all, is our security communications and engagement group. This team is responsible for defining and prioritizing and communicating all of our operationalizing capabilities that improve overall communications excellence and return on investment for security. The primary role here is just security communications. So more of the comm side of the house for us there. So Grusha was an intern in our security engineering and operations team and came back to the same team. He's still there. So what did you work on when you were an intern, and what are you working on now as a new grad?
Sure. So during my internship, Ryan, I actually worked on multiple facets of things. So some of those include automating the recurring manual tasks for my team. I worked on building meaningful dashboards for the team that increase the visibility into companies' assets. Worked on two projects end to end independently, and then even collaborated with other teams to get things running. I also got opportunity to shadow on live projects that my other teammates were working on. So such as, POCs of new tools, ongoing deployments, etc. And I also actually organized a team event during my internship. So it wasn't all work. It was actually a lot of fun too on the side. The nature of my work on a very high level still remains the same now that I'm a full-time employee here. But I want to mention that I'm learning so much more in depth about what goes on into planning a task or project, foreseeing its outcome, identifying any challenges or blockers, and laying down steps for success accordingly. Part of this, I think, comes from the fact that I came back to a very different team due to the internal reorganization that took place. The scope of the work, the size of the team had all evolved by the time I was back. So I'm now levels deeper into the mix, and I'm learning about operational excellence while we rebuild our processes. We are being more cautious in how we stand up our resilient environment. So this essentially builds up on the knowledge that I gained during my internship. Um, all of what I worked on, whether it was during my internship or even now, has had a huge impact on the company, our customers, and stakeholders alike. It all focuses on keeping trust as our number one value, like you mentioned earlier before, Ryan, by taking care of actually the systems that enable Salesforce employees, which in turn enables our customers. So you can say that my team and I, enable the enablers at Salesforce.
That's awesome. I love that, Grusha. Um, I want to point out that Grusha interviewed specifically for this team as an intern, and so that might be kind of different some of the other opportunities that you see out there. And so we have you interview with that actual specific team, so you know what areas you'll be supporting and to learn a bit more about the team and the problems they solve and how you contribute before you even come on board, excuse me. And sometimes the first team isn't the perfect match, which I believe happened to Grusha. Isn't that right? We had you interview for a couple different teams.
Yep, that's
All right.
exactly what happened. Yep.
Yeah, so if we see the potential there, but maybe the skill set doesn't exactly line up, we're definitely going to try and get you in front of the right team. That might be a better fit. But before we go any further into that, let's take a look at the recruiting timeline and process. Well, actually, before we get into that, let's take a look at what we are looking for in our candidates, and then we'll dive into the timeline for recruiting. All right. So first of all, what we're mostly looking for, and is really a huge factor in our decision-making process, is your passion and interest in security. So this goes a really long way with the hiring teams. The security community is super close-knit, and you will probably run into a lot of the same people throughout your career. So making sure that you have a passion and interest in security is very important and will go a long way in building those relationships. That passion and interest also directly correlates to how active you are involved in the community. So do you participate in CTFs or capture the flags on campus, or at regional competitions, things like that? Are you doing red versus blue activities? Have you attended cybersecurity conferences such as DEF CON or maybe Women in Cybersecurity? Do you go out and participate in bug bounty programs? Things like that. I do see a lot of students that have certifications on their resumes. While they're certainly not required, I do think they go a long way in the resume review process, since it does really show your passion and interest in the field for you to dedicate that amount of time to receive your certification. On the resume front, I'm going to just kind of break it up into two main focus areas. And, from the previous part of our presentation where we went over the roles, I'm just going to really focus on security engineering and software engineering, since that's the majority of our hiring. And so when we're looking for things in security engineer type of roles, we're really looking for if you have a BS or MS in that security or super related field. If you're not getting your BS or MS in that, are you a CS student who's very involved in the security community, things like that. And then for those security engineers, we're also looking at how familiar are you with the best practice for the particular area that you're interested in. For example, if you wanted to be a product security engineer, are you knowledgeable in what the OWASP Top 10 is, and will you be able to speak to that in an interview with the team, because they're definitely going to cover something like that. In regards to classes that we're looking for security engineers, network security, pen testing, endpoint security, threat and vulnerability management, and how well you are or how familiar you are with distributed systems and public cloud, since that's what Salesforce practically runs on, is a huge, giant distributed system serviced by a public cloud. And so we build a lot of features on top of that. So that kind of covers security engineer. The other one is software engineer. I kind of mentioned this at the beginning a bit. So they're mostly looking for folks that are CS students, have really strong distributed systems and public cloud knowledge, don't necessarily need to be super familiar with security best practices, mostly because you're going to be building out tools and features to help run the security systems that the other groups are building. Some knowledge of network security is also helpful, but definitely not required. This group is super open to upskilling folks, and if you're interested in security, this is a good way to kind of maybe break your way into the field. All right. I know I've talked a little bit about what makes a really strong security candidate to us, but I think Grusha also has some really great visibility into that. So Grusha, what do you think makes a strong security candidate?
I think you laid out some great points there, Ryan, and I would love to add some more things to this because I actually took the liberty of asking my leadership at Salesforce and what they look for in a strong security candidate, and I'm going to share an amalgamation of their response and my opinion here. So I'd say it's really a combination of technical proficiency, how curious and perceptive you are, and whether or not you're willing to learn continuously. Given the nature of this field and the fact that we all know the technology changes every day, so do the security measures relating to it. As a security engineer, you not only have to be able to keep up with the new technologies coming in, but you also have to keep up with its flaws, and you should be able to determine how to keep your assets, your organization, the stakeholders safe despite of those existing flaws. So if you have these qualities on top of being technically proficient, and what I mean by this is that if you are curious, if you are self-motivated to skill up according to the trends, are bold and are not afraid to deal with adversities, and in security world that actually translates to 0 days, um, and you're willing to adapt to ever-changing scenarios, you are a pretty strong candidate.
I think that's a great point. Going back to curiosity and not being afraid to ask questions, I think that gets you really far, not only in just like an interview process, but in your success as an intern or employee at the company. Um, so that's great that you brought that up. Now that we have covered some of the areas in securities, now that we have covered the areas in security that we hire for, boy, I'm having a hard time talking today. What we are looking for in candidates, let's dive a bit deeper into the recruiting process, okay? So one thing I do really want to highlight and bring to the forefront of this discussion, just so we're being transparent, is our university recruiting team in the security side really just only focuses on internship hiring and converting those interns into any new grad hiring. So we don't have a lot of new grad opportunities, if any, since we really try to go through the internship conversion route. So I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page for that. But for our summer 2022 internships, the recruiting process, the majority takes place between September and December. So interviews will start to happen for the various opportunities that we have starting in September, and they'll just start to snowball as we get through October and November, and we'll start to wrap it up by December. And so like I had mentioned earlier, we'll be hiring for 120 interns globally. 100 of those will be in EMEA. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity here. But once you're selected for interviews, I'd say the process usually takes about 4 weeks, plus or minus a week, before we're ready to make an offer decision. How long you wait before you get selected into the interview process really just determines on when we find the right role for you and if you're qualified for that, okay? But once you get in that process, about 4 weeks you can expect. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the interview process. It's pretty straightforward and simple. We just do 2 45 to 60-minute interviews. Usually the first one is typically with the engineer from the team and will be almost 100% technical. And if you pass that round, we will schedule a final interview with the hiring manager. That interview with the hiring manager is usually more behavioral in nature, but you should still expect, to review some technical concepts at a more broad and high level. And then we'll pretty much, I'd say about 80% of the roles follow that order, but sometimes the hiring managers like to go first, so it could be vice versa, but just know it'll be the same structure, just with a different order, okay? All right, so I wanted to talk about some tips for being successful in your interview. I think if I could just really emphasize one point to help you be more successful in your interview is that you shouldn't be afraid to ask clarifying and follow-up questions once a problem or question has been posed, just to make sure you understand what is being asked. One of the number one pieces of feedback that I see for candidates about not being able to move forward is they just understand the problem correctly, and they made some assumptions, and they might have solved the problem incorrectly based on those assumptions. So no one's going to be penalizing you if you're asking for following or clarifying questions. It's actually probably going to score you more points with the interview team, just because it's showing your thought process, right? We really want to understand that as well. And kind of piggybacking off of, asking questions. If you get stuck, don't be afraid to ask for help. They're mostly internship or new grad opportunities. You're not experts in these fields. We don't expect you to know everything, so don't be afraid to ask for help. And then lastly, if a manager or the engineer is, trying to give you hints on which direction to take, just go ahead and take those hints. These are, some of the more common reasons why folks don't pass interviews that I see. Of course, you have to have the technical competencies as well. But having these pieces of advice, I think, really helps you set yourself up for success, making sure you're approaching the questions properly and getting help if you need it. All right. So Grusha's been pretty good about preparing for interviews. And I think that's, one of the main reasons she got hired. She was very thorough in making sure she understood the role from myself, and how to prepare for the interview. But I'd love also to get your take a little bit more on how you think it's best to prepare for an interview, Grusha.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan. And I think, you've already listed out like two great points. And I remember you giving the same advice to me at that time. If I could actually list and list things and still not cover them all, because honestly this is a very subjective question, since different things work for different people. But if I have to zero in on a few really important generic things or methods of making sure that you are actually heading in the right direction with your preparation, I'd say start with polishing your basics. It all actually comes down to that. So connecting the dots is a really underrated skill, and I guess that you can only successfully do it when you have your basics strong. So yeah, work on your basics. That should be the first step. Second should be that, I think you should go ahead and read the job description thoroughly for the role that you will be interviewing for. Note down the terms and technologies listed in the job description and work on them. Just because it would give you, a little bit more idea about what the role is going to be like, what skill set is the hiring manager, the hiring team is looking for, and you may be able to, spot some of the work you have already done in those areas, and may be able to be ready to talk about it better. Another thing would be practice scripting and basic coding concepts. Security is a highly automation centric field, and just because of the amount of data that the teams deal with. So I think it's necessary that you have these basic skills. I think the last thing that's coming on top of my head is that get in touch with your recruiter, ask him or her about the nature of your upcoming interview, whether it's going to be a technical interview or a behavioral interview. What is going to be the level of technicality? Is it going to be a coding interview, or just like based on your resume, checking your technical knowledge? And asking the HR about what all you can prepare around. And in fact, I'd actually like to give you a shout out, Ryan, for this, just because, you were extremely helpful when it came to this while I was interviewing with Salesforce. So thank you for that. And yeah,
Sure.
like, yeah, you said, don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that's very important, just because, interviewing process, it's actually a two-way street. It's not like, the company's interviewing you. You also need to know that, if the company culture is, what you're looking for, if you really like the team or not. So really asking questions, figuring out, you know, parts of team culture, company that you think you would align with better. It all comes through that.
That's awesome. Thanks for the shout out. I'm glad I could help you be successful. I don't think a lot of people take enough advantage of their recruiters and asking for guidance in the interview process. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to them. trust me, we want to fill the position just as much as you want to get it. So if you have questions on how to be more successful, we are happy to help. So I think we've covered pretty much all of the basics that we wanted to get into today. So we're going to open it up to some Q&A. I saw one question that came in was, when do applications for summer 2022 interns open? You'll probably start to see them to trickle onto our careers page probably starting in the next week or two. And I think the majority of them will probably all be posted by mid-October. So our team is currently, working on processing all of our intern conversions from the summer and making the transition over to our fall recruiting. And that's just starting to happen this week and next. So a lot of that stuff will start to open up around the middle of September and get into full swing once October comes into play. There's a question around, do we hire solutions engineers? Not in security, but I know Salesforce does. So I think if we have a presentation coming up on CSG and solutions engineers, I think that's probably where you'll find more information on them. But in regards to the security team, there's no solutions engineers that we hire. Do I have any other questions? Oh, this one's for you, Grusha. What were some things that attracted you to Salesforce specifically?
Wow. I think the first thing that actually pops up in my head would be just the company culture. I had actually heard so much about the Ohana culture that Salesforce has, the flexibility that the company gives to its employees, the great benefits that they have. And I think I have to mention this, on top of everything, is that I heard how strong the security team there was. So I really, really wanted to, work with the stalwarts in the industry, get to learn from them, share with them, and also be a part of, really open and great flexible company culture. I think those were the key things that really did attract me to the company.
Yeah, that's great. I think one other thing a lot of students really like about Salesforce is just the amount of growth that we're still growing through. It is just phenomenal how much we are growing. And with that growth just comes a lot of opportunity for you to grow your career and try out different areas, just because, you come on as, an intern on the scope team and you start as a new grad there, it doesn't mean you're going to be there for the rest of your career, right? We have an internal careers team that helps folks figure out what their next move is going to be. Are you going to move laterally to a different team? Do you want to try out leadership? Things like that. So with the amazing amount of growth that we have, there's just so much opportunity for folks to get more exposure across the whole realm of security. We got a question on, when do applications usually close? We really try and set the goal of having all of our intern hiring finished by the winter holidays. And so, we're getting better at achieving that goal. We usually don't always achieve it, so we'll still have like a few open positions probably in January and February that we'll fill. But we'll look to aim to fill probably 80 to 90% of our 100 openings here in America for or by the winter holidays. Cool. I think those are all of the questions that we got. So we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank Grusha for her time and, of course, choosing Salesforce to come and work for us. She's been nothing but a rock star. If you guys have further questions, I think you can comment in our post and we can get back to you then. But lastly, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing your applications. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.